The 1960s was an extremely eventful time. This decade was characterized by artistic and cultural movements in music and fashion, as well as sports and political events such as civil rights and the Cold War.
Politically, many significant events took place in the 1960s. The world was in the midst of the Cold War, a strained arms race between the world's two major superpowers, the Communist Soviet Union and the anti-communist United States. The biggest part of this conflict was the 13-day-long Cuban Missile Crisis in November of 1962, which occurred as a result of the U.S. finding a secret arsenal of nuclear weapons from the USSR in Cuba. During this time, it seemed as though the world could break into nuclear war at any moment, which would surely mean the annihilation of the planet. The conflict ended when the USSR agreed to withdraw its nuclear weapons from Cuba as long as the U.S. did not invade.
Along the arms race came the space race. The two nations competed to create advancements in spatial technology. The USSR was the first to send a man into space. Yuri Gagarin orbited the planet on April 12, 1961. Despite having later start in the space race, the U.S. was successful in sending the first man to the moon. Neil Armstrong's historic moon landing happened on July 20, 1969.
The Cold War was caused conflicts in southern East Asia. The Vietnam War began in the mid-50s and ran through the entire decade of 1960s. It occurred between the communists in North Vietnam along with their allies, the USSR and China, who wanted to take over the South, and the anti-communists in South Vietnam, who were aided by the U.S. and other anti-communist allies. In protest of the war, many peace protests were held, such as the one in Washington, D.C. in 1969. Hippie culture also arose to prominence as their anti-war message of peace and love appealed to many young people. Hippies believed in nonviolence, individual freedom, and free love. Drugs like marijuana and LSD were a large part of their culture, as they believed they allowed them to reach a higher level of consciousness.
What do we want? Equal rights! When do we want it? Now! What do we want? Equal rights! When do we want it? Now!
Civil rights was another significant movement in this time period. During this time, there were famous inspirational leaders that made an impact on our generation today, such as Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, and Malcolm X. The civil rights movement took place in the 1950s and ended in 1968. The civil rights movement paved the way for many athletes of color as well. In 1960, Wilma Rudolph became the first American woman to win 3 gold medals at the Olympics. As an African American woman, this victory represented a huge turning point for women of color and the black community in general.
Love was only true in fairy tales, and for someone else, but not for me. Our love was out.
If everybody had an ocean across the USA, then everybody'd be served like California. You'd see them wearing their baggies, Warachi sandals too. Two, three, four.
The first Woodstock Music Festival took place over 3 days in August of 1969 on a dairy farm in upstate New York. It was a pivotal moment for pop music and a huge event for young people, especially the hippie community. Acclaimed artists such as Jimi Hendrix, Santana, Janis Joplin, and The Who performed.
From revolutionary new music to major political happenings, it was undoubtedly one of the most exciting, tragic, triumphant, and fun decades of the 20th century all in one.